Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Janaballabha Giri Bardari Jai Gopi Janaballabha Giri Bardari Yasoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yasoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jai Vishnupad Paramhamsa Parvadikacharya To Tadasata Shri Shri His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Grantarad Shrimad Bhagavatam Ki Sambheda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Gaur Premanandi. All glories to the seven devotees. All glories to the seven devotees. All glories to the seven devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Gananjana Shalakhaya Chakshur Anmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Shtapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamhayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhunam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Dapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavan Eshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare. All right, so we are reading Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 10, Text 10. Purushondam vinirbhidya Purushondam vinirbhidya Yadasaosa vinirgataha Yadasaosa vinirgataha Atmano yanam anvichan Atmano yanam anvichan Aposrakshich chuchi shuchihi. Now there's a good one. Aposrakshich chuchi shuchihi. Try saying that last line 10 times really fast. Purushondam vinirbhidya yadasao sa vinirgataha atmano yanam anvichan apo shrakshit chuchi shuchihi Purushondam vinirbhidya yadasao sa vinirgataha atmano yanam anvichan apo shrakshit chuchi shuchihi Purushondam vinirbhidya yadasao sa vinirgataha atmano yanam anvichan apo shrakshit chuchi shuchihi Purushondam vinirbhidya yadasao sa vinirgataha atmano yanam anvichan apo shrakshit chuchi shuchihi Purushondam vinirbhidya yadasao sa vinirgataha atmano yanam anvichan apo shrakshit chuchi shuchihi Purushaha, the Supreme Person, Paramatma. Andam, the universes. Vinirbhidya, making them each separately situated. Yada, when. Asau, the same. Saha, he, the Lord. Vinirgataha, came out. Atmanaha, of himself. Anyam, lying in place. Anvichan, desiring. Apaha, water. Ashrakshit, created. Suchihi, the most pure. Shuchihi, transcendental. So the English translation reads, after separating the different universes, the gigantic universal form of the Lord, Mahavishnu, which came out of the causal ocean, the place of appearance for the first Purusha avatar, entered into each of the separate universes, desiring to lie on the created transcendental water, Garbhodaka. So I say, and you please repeat, after separating the different universes, the gigantic universal form of the Lord Mahavishnu, which came out of the cosmic ocean, the place of appearance for the first Purusha avatar, entered into each of the separated universes, desiring to lie on the created transcendental water, Garbhodaka. The analysis of the living entities and the Supreme Lord, Paramatma, the independent source of all other living beings, Srila Sukadeva Goswami is now presenting the prime necessity for devotional service to the Lord, which is the only occupational business of all living entities. The Supreme Lord, Sri Krishna, and all his plenary portions and extensions of plenary portions are non-different from one another. And thus, the supreme independence is in each and every one of them. In order to prove this, Shukadeva Goswami, as promised to King Parikshit, describes herein the independence of the Purusha Avatara, personality of Godhead, even in the sphere of material creation. Such activities of the Lord are also transcendental, and therefore they are also transcendental. Such activities of the Lord are also transcendental, and therefore they are also Leela, or pastimes of the Absolute Lord. Such pastimes of the Lord are very conducive to the hearers for self-realization in the field of devotional service. Some may argue, why not relish the transcendental Leela of the Lord as exhibited in the land of Mathura and Vrindavan, which is sweeter than anything in the world? Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur replies that the pastimes of the Lord in Vrindavan are meant to be relished by advanced devotees of the Lord. Neophyte devotees will misunderstand such supreme transcendental activities of the Lord. And therefore, the Lord's pastimes in the material sphere related to creation, maintenance, and destruction are verily relishable by the prakrita, or mundane devotees of the Lord. As the yoga system is mainly based on bodily exercises, is meant for the person who is too much attached to the bodily conception of existence, similarly, the Lord's pastimes related to the creation and destruction of the material world are for those who are too materially attached. For such mundane creatures, the functions of the body and the functions of the cosmic world, through the physical laws in relationship with the Lord, are also included in the understanding of the lawmaker, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The scientists explain the material functions by so many technological terms of material law, but such blind scientists forget the lawmaker. The Srimad Bhagavatam points out the lawmaker. One should not be amazed by the mechanical arrangement of the complicated engine or dynamo, but one should praise the engineer who creates such a wonderful working machine. That is the difference between the devotee and the non-devotee. Devotees are always full with praising the Lord, who directs the physical laws. In Bhagavad Gita, chapter 9, text 10, the direction of the Lord upon the material nature is as follows. Maya dhyakshrena prakriti suyate sacharacharam hetu nanena konteya jagad viparyavartate. The material nature, full of physical laws, is one of my different energies. Therefore, it is neither independent nor blind. Because I am transcendently all-powerful, simply by my glancing over material nature, the physical laws of nature work so wonderfully. The actions and reactions of physical laws work on that account, and thus the material world is created, maintained, and annihilated again and again. Men with a poor fund of knowledge, however, become astonished by studying the physical laws, both within the construction of the individual body and within the cosmic manifestation. And foolishly they decry the existence of God, taking it for granted that the physical laws are independent, without any metaphysical control. The Bhagavad Gita 9.11 replies to this foolishness with the following words: Avajananti mamudha manushim tanum ashritam param bhavam ajananto mama bhuta maheshwaram. Foolish men, mudhas, do not know the personality of God in his eternal form of bliss and knowledge. The foolish man thinks of transcendental body of the Lord as something like his own, and therefore he cannot think of the unlimited controlling power of the Lord, who is not visible in the acting of the physical laws. The Lord is, however, visible to the naked eyes of people in general when he descends himself by his own personal potency. Lord Krishna incarnated himself as he is and played very wonderful parts as the Lord himself and as the Bhagavad Gita concerned, and the Bhagavad Gita concerns such wonderful actions and knowledge. Yet foolish men will not accept the Lord Krishna as the Supreme Lord. Generally, they consider the infinitesimal and infinite features of the Lord because they themselves are unable to become either infinitesimal or infinite. But one should know that the infinite and the infinitesimal sizes of the Lord are not his highest glories. The most wonderful manifestation of the Lord's power is exhibited when the infinite Lord becomes visible to our eyes as one of us. Yet his activities are different from those of the finite beings. Lifting a mountain at the age of 7 years and marrying 16,000 wives in the prime of his youth are some of examples of his infinite energy. But the mudhas, after seeing them or hearing about them, decry them as legendary and take the Lord as one of them. They cannot understand that Lord Sri Krishna, although in the form of a human being, by his own potency, is still the Supreme Lord, with full potency as the Supreme Controller. When, however, the mudhas give submissive and oral reception to the messages of the Lord, as in the Srimad Bhagavad Gita or the Srimad Bhagavatam, through the channel of disciplic succession, such mudhas also become devotees of the Lord by the grace of his pure devotees. And for this reason only, either the Bhagavad Gita or the Srimad Bhagavatam, the pastimes of the Lord in the material world, are delineated for the benefit of those men with a poor fund of knowledge. Purushondam vinirvidya yadasau savinirgataha atmano yanam anvichchan aposhrak shuchihi. After separating the different universes, the gigantic universal form of the Lord Mahavishnu, which came out of the causal ocean, the place of appearance for the first Purusha avatar, entered into each of the separated universes, desiring on the created transcendental water, Garbhodaka. Wow, what a verse. Any questions right off the top before we get into this a little bit? Yes. Uh-huh. Yeah. It's, I would say, kind of like a telescope. You know, you get these kind of folding telescopes where something pops out, then another thing pops out, then another thing pops out. And so you have one thing expanding from another thing, expanding from another thing, expanding from another thing. So sometimes in explanations, the Vedas or Prabhupada even too, leave out some of the intermediate, you know. So if B expands from A, and C expands from B, and D expands from C, then we could say A is the source of C, and leave out, you know, B, you know. And so in this way, sometimes the intermediate aspects are kind of omitted, or we say directly that it comes from one, but actually there's an intermediate or intervening stage. Is that your question?
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So with that little paradigm you just built for me, what would be the A, and like what is the more basic explanation, and which one's more specific?
Well, generally it's described that you have first expansion is first origin, the avatari is Krishna himself. From Krishna is always said Balaram expands. And then we get the Chaturvyuha, you know, which gets a little bit variously differently described as, you know, Vasudev, Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha. So these four. Then sometimes it mentions the second Chaturvyuha, so sometimes that's talked about, sometimes it's omitted. And then you get into the next expansion, which is, you know, eventually we get into the Purusha avatars. We have Mahavishnu, and from Mahavishnu expands Garbhodakshaya Vishnu, as is being discussed in this verse today, and then Kshirodakshaya Vishnu. And Kshirodakshaya Vishnu expands as the super soul. So you've got all this kind of sort of telescoping out stuff going on. And probably it's even more complicated than that because even from, you know, if you've had any brush with science, you begin to realize how nothing is straightforward in this world. Everything's complicated and gnarly and mixed up, and it comes up in all kinds of details and extra stuff going on. And you look closer, you see yet another layer of something going on. So why is it like that? And the answer is that the material universe is designed to be bewildering, so that you can kind of come up with your own theory of what's going on here. And to some extent it works, because it's so bewildering for everybody, whether you're a demon or a devotee, or whether you're a scientist or materialist or whatever you believe. It's so bewildering to everybody that you can make a case for practically anything. However, in the long run, if you try to understand things through the eyes of Vedic literature, more of the pieces fit together than in any other explanation, you know. So it has a better and more complete and more exhaustive way of tying everything together, whereas everything else looks good in some places and starts to fall apart in others, you know. So this verse, 2.10.10, is the first of a new section that we're entering. This chapter 10 of Canto 2 is, Burijan divides it into 3 sections from 1 to 9, which is the 10 subject matters of Srimad Bhagavatam. Then from 10 to 31, which is this section where the living entity is exhorted to try to take shelter of the supreme shelter, ashraya. So we are told that the living entity should take shelter of the supreme ashraya. At the same time, we're hearing about how Garbhavishnu comes from Mahavishnu. That's what's going on in this second section from 10 to 31, and then from 32 to 51, which is the last third of this particular chapter, we hear about how the Supreme Lord is on beyond the coverings of the material universe and is a source of creation, maintenance, and annihilation. So here Prabhupada makes a quite intricate point about how the living entity can understand the Supreme Lord. And the Supreme Lord is coming to us not only from the spiritual world when we hear about his pastimes, but we also experience the Supreme Lord in the workings of material nature. And material nature is dazzling in the various things that it does. And it does things in a very specific and sometimes very peculiar way, as we just mentioned. So these are also pastimes of the Lord. And one may say, as Prabhupada makes the possibility here, or he uses that as an example, why not just study the Leela of the Lord? And the answer, of course, is that unless you're very advanced, the Leela's going to get you tangled up. If you've ever read some of the more intricate pastimes of Radha and Krishna, it's easy to start to get a little bit confused about what's going on there, especially if you have no foundation in the 9 cantos that precede the 10th canto. If you've never had any explanation of the Lord's amazing energies. When you understand the Lord's amazing energies and you hear how many of them there are, and you hear how amazingly expanded the explanations are in Srimad Bhagavatam, then when you hear about Krishna as a little boy and he's dallying with the gopis, you start to think that this isn't just an ordinary boy-girl story. This is something else going on. Otherwise, tendency is to think that this is just some kind of boy-girl story, because in fact, all boy-girl stories are a perverted reflection of this story. So this is something very different. And we see that Krishna plays like a little boy and he does mischievous things, but at the same time, he can hold up Govardhan Hill on the little finger of his left hand, which not many people can do. So, Shrishti, Sthiti, and Pralaya. Creation, maintenance, and annihilation. The Supreme Lord does all those things. He creates, maintains, and annihilates. Sometimes different Sanskrit words are used. Sometimes Nirodha is used instead of Pralaya. And there are other words also for creation and maintenance. But we're hearing a sort of mysterious explanation of how things emanate from the Supreme and how we have sense objects, we have senses, we have demigods in control of the senses, and we have the Supreme Lord, who is the controller of the demigods, the senses, and the sense objects. So all these 4 categories are interacting in a very mysterious way. Take for a minute the example that usually gets described in scientific terms. We have light coming from some light source like these halogens up here at the top, and goes into the eyeball. There's a little lens. It gets flipped upside down, reflected on the back of the eyeball near the retina. There are light-sensitive rods and cones, and they are activated by the various colors of the light. And they produce tiny pulses of electricity. So these tiny pulses of electricity go from the back of the eyeball, and they cross, oddly enough, and enter into the brain stem. So we're seeing that light energy gets turned into electrical pulses, and once those electrical pulses disappear through the optic nerve that crosses into the back of the brain, the brain has various processing areas where it does different things. And so far, the explanation has been very rich and expansive by the science. But what happens next? That's where the explanation just abruptly stops. It's like an 8-lane highway, and suddenly it just ends, you know. Okay, we got the electricity, we've got some computer processing maybe going on, but where is vision? Where is vision? We all know what it feels like to get an electrical shock, and vision is nothing like that. So where do we go from these electric impulses to a view, a panorama of the world in front of us? Nobody goes there. Nobody explains that part. So it's like an 8-lane freeway that just abruptly ends. And so this is the problem that people have when they try to explain the world from the standpoint of laws. So you have a lot of people in the world who think that primary are the laws. And if there is some being or something like that, he must be bound by the laws. But we see it the other way around. We see that there is a lawmaker, and he is in no way bound by the laws because he creates them. He can arbitrarily cause them to remain in force or suspend them or whatever he likes, alter them. And so he's not dependent on his laws. And this is the Krishna that we know. Any questions or comments? It's tricky trying to do a class in 45 minutes, and I'm the worst person at it, so yeah. Not.
Mentioning that the material world is also a form of Leela of the Lord reminded me sometimes of like you're like pushing like part of your mind body, telling to like spit out their philosophy. Like you're like, all right, so you think that you're God, but you know you're this passing stool and you're getting sick and you know why do you go to the hospital? Like Prabhupada criticized who is it? One of these stupid avatars, and because he went to the hospital and someone popped in his face or something like that. And so there are sometimes Sai Baba says that. And so what these bogus avatars will say is like, oh, this is just my Leela.
Right. Leela of getting sick and pooping and puking and all these kind of things. This is a wonderful Leela. It's a stupid game if this is the game we created. You know, it's obvious that someone didn't think it through very, very thoroughly. And the obvious fact is that we didn't create this game. We're here because we're, you know, in prison. That's why we're here. We've done something wrong, and now we're in a situation where we're having to bear the unpleasant consequences of our mistake. But we can get out. We're not here eternally, and it isn't that there's no escape hatch, but the escape hatch is there for those who take up spiritual life. That's the takeaway, the main takeaway. Take up spiritual life and you get out. So we're roaring right up on 8 o'clock right now, as my little Qualcomm magic square says. So we'll end here, and thank you all very much for your kind attention. All glories to Srimad Bhagavatam, all glories to the Vaishnava devotees of the Lord. Hare Krishna.